I am Marcy Fessler, President of the First Friday Club Board. In the name of our officers, board members, and committees, welcome to the August Luncheon, which represents the final luncheon of our 20th anniversary season. I want to take a moment and just say that I am truly grateful. Words cannot express my gratitude to everyone here in this room and everyone that has been a participant for this 20th anniversary season. It has been a wonderful season, and I think we are ending it with a bang. So take a moment and give yourselves a hand. It's just been wonderful. Thank you all so much. And if you don't know, next year's programs are all set. There's a brochure on the table. If you need more, they're on the welcome desk. Make sure you take them. Next year, 21, it's pretty cool too. So as reminders, take out your phone, make sure it's silenced. Check your watch, make sure that's on silent. I'm pretty sure Dr. Beelen will not dance to your ringtone. Oh, wait, no, Mrs. Beelen said she will, so look out. Anyone needing religious education certification hours, there's a form at the welcome table if you didn't sign in. Be sure to like us on Facebook for any updates. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you haven't and don't know why, we record all of our luncheons, and if you miss something, you can go on there and find it and watch it, and they are fabulous. Courtney does an amazing job recording us. Courtney, do a wave. Give Courtney a hand. So next month's presentation, we will gather for our luncheon on September 10th. Mark it down. It's the second Thursday. The Canfield Fair is the first Thursday, and we all know in the hierarchy of things. So the second Thursday, September 10th. And we are going to hear Judge Durkin, and he's going to reflect on a view from the bench, a look back at the last 30 years. So that I'm personally excited for that one. Reservations are due 1 week before the luncheon. Dr. Beelen will entertain questions during the last 10 minutes of his presentation. And let's take a moment and bow our heads, remembering our speaker, all who have gathered here today, those who are unable to join us, and for all the prayers we hold in our hearts. In a spirit of praise and thanks, we say, God, our Creator, you sustain our lives through the gift of your Spirit and the following of Jesus. Stir in us desire to learn, to love, to serve more generously, to act on behalf of justice and truth. And we ask these blessings in your holy name. Amen. And I get the distinct pleasure of introducing Dr. George Beelen, who holds a BA from YSU, an MA in History from Western Reserve University, John Hay Fellowship from Northwestern University, and a PhD from Kent State University. Dr. Beelen taught at Pullen High School for 8 years and was a professor and chair and lobbyist at YSU for 40 years. Dr. Beelen's community involvement is truly remarkable, including 3 terms as Austintown trustee, consultant for the Youngstown City Schools, Mahoning Valley Historical Society, Steel Museum, the Hospice Board, and the United Nations Association, and that's just to mention a few. Bishop James Malone invited Dr. Beelen to speak to members of the clergy and other ministers of the Diocese of Youngstown on the history of minority groups in War and Peace, which was based on the National Council of Bishops Declaration. He is founder and president of the Ohio Cultural Alliance, which is created to learn about the different ethnic groups who migrated to the area. Dr. Beelen and his beautiful wife, Betty, will celebrate 70 years of marriage come November. all the honors and accolades Dr. Beelen has, their greatest treasures are their 3 children, 9 grandchildren, and 10 great-grandchildren. And I spoke with Mrs. Beelen yesterday, and I said, I need a fun fact or two. So Mrs. Beelen shared, and I think this is the fun fact to end all of fun facts, that while they were on their pilgrimage to the Holy Land, they had the honor to renew their marriage vows at Cana. Who can say that? So with all of that, please help me welcome Dr. George Beelen.
Thank you, Marcy. And while I'm thanking people, I'd like to thank all the members of the First Friday Committee and congratulate you on this 20th year. That's wonderful. 20 years of this wonderful organization. Seeing a lot of people who have helped me. I got this invitation to speak 13 months ago. At 89 years old, but he said, that's pretty optimistic, you know, taking that kind of a invitation. So I thank Mary Ellen, and I thank Ray Novotny, who were very helpful in setting things up for me here. Well, I hope you like my maps. That's a map that I got years ago. It was in literature on one of the airplanes. And it had this, gave the dimensions. I said, oh, it won't be bad. And it was. And you can see, if you haven't looked at it yet, how very small the country is that we're dealing with. That's a great big world. And right there in the Middle East, you have little Israel. We'll obviously be talking about that. Our visit to the Holy Land piqued an interest for this historian, and a place of great history and significant currency. It led me to read even more about the places we visited. It moved me to share these moments with others as the historian with some knowledge, but hardly an expert on the Holy Land. I've given this talk probably 4 or 5 times over the last several years. Always changing it a little bit, always reflecting a little more, finding some more information. But this time I contextualized the two. So before I talk about our journey, our pilgrimage to the Holy Land, I like to sort of put the Holy Land into some context. The Holy Land is traditionally known as the land of Israel, or Zion, or the Promised Land in a biblical or religious context, or as Canaan or Palestine in a secular or geographic context. It's referred to in the Bible, most explicitly in Zechariah 2:12, which calls the land of Israel, quote, his portion in the Holy Land, unquote. It is primarily identified as the Promised Land, or Canaan, in the Old Testament, and the land of Israel in the New Testament, encompassing the area between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. Today, it mostly includes the combined territory of the modern states of Israel and Palestine, with a population of about 14 to 15 million total in Israel. With Gaza about 2 or 2.5 million, the West Bank about 3.5 million, and the state of Israel proper, the Jewish portion, about 10 million. Although the land was occupied earlier by many, many groups, of course, back to the Neolithic age, back to the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, and the Babylonians and the Jewish and the Persians, Greeks and Romans and Muslims. So it's been occupied for thousands of years, literally. Today, the most notable religions that are revered in the Holy Land are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Each of the religions has a particular connection to Jerusalem, which is the holiest city in Judaism and Christianity, and the third holiest in Islam, behind Mecca and Medina. All three of these faiths have Abrahamic connections. Let's talk about that a moment. In the case of Judaism, God promised the land to Abraham and his descendants some 2,000 years before Christ. Moses was sent to lead the Israelites out of Egypt to reach this land about 1460 BC. And the reign of King David became the king of Israel and made Jerusalem the capital of Israel around 1040 BC. In the case of Christianity, for Christians, we know the Holy Land is considered holy because of its association with the birth, the ministry, the crucifixion, and the resurrection of Jesus, whom Christians regard as the incarnation of God and the Messiah. In the case of Islam, Abraham, known in Islam as Ibrahim with an I, is revered as a prophet, messenger, and the foundation of a pure monotheistic faith. He's considered the father of the prophets, including Ishmael, ancestor of Prophet Muhammad, and Isaac, and is honored for his absolute submission to God. Islam began in the 7th century in the Arabian Peninsula with the life and revelation of the Prophet Muhammad and the adherence to his laws, which include, again, total submission to the will of God, or Allah. So all three faiths have connections to Abraham, and all three are monotheistic. So one would think that these religious groups could coexist and complement each other, or at least tolerate each other. However, historically and currently, this has not been the case. The Holy Land is notable for being the site of numerous religious wars. In the Middle Ages, the Christians aimed at restoring Christian sovereignty in the region after it was lost earlier in Muslim conquests. In the 19th century, the Holy Land became the subject of international wrangling regarding the Ottoman Empire, culminating in the Crimean War in the 1850s. Around the same time, the emergence of Zionism spurred a sizable portion of the Jewish diaspora to begin working towards the development of the region as the Jewish homeland. Eventually, following the numerous waves of Jewish immigration, the Zionist movement issued the Israeli Declaration of Independence in May of 1948, triggering the first Arab-Israeli War. Since then, the Holy Land's religious and political atmosphere has been dominated by the Israeli-Palestinian conflicts. Current events tell us of the horrendous actions since October 7, 2023, with the attendant internecine warfare, including despicable torture and killing. Well, who then has the greatest claim to Israel, with all those having some claim? Here's what Israel says. The state of Israel, established again in 1948, claims the land as the historical and ancestral homeland of the Jewish people, dating back thousands of years. The Torah holds that God granted this land to the Jewish people. Momentary decline from area. When we traveled some of the desert, it was pretty bad. And I'm sure some of the Jews looked up and said, "This is the promised land that you promised us?" Well, anyway, so the Torah holds that God granted the land to the Jewish people as an everlasting possession and religious obligation to dwell there. Israel views its control over Jerusalem as based upon these historical ties and the city's role as the ancient kingdom of Israel. They claim that the Jews are an indigenous people returning to their homeland. How about the Palestinians? What do they say? Palestinians, including the Palestinian Authority, claim the same lands as their homeland, the right of both to self-determination. The United Nations and many other countries considered Israeli settlements on the West Bank and East Jerusalem to be illegal under international law. Well, there's a one-state and a two-state solution. A one-state solution means that the residents of Israel and Palestine live in one country with equal rights and share all the land. The two-state solution is for Israel and Palestine to be two different states, each being contiguous, economically viable, and independent. What does our Pope Leo have to say? Well, he's weighed in on innumerable occasions. He said, first of all, there needs to be a permanent ceasefire. Secondly, we need to immediately release all the hostages and a two-state, effect as two-state solution. He has consistently advocated for humanitarian aid and access in Gaza, and expressed deep concern over civilian casualties in both Gaza and the West Bank. He demanded an end then to collective punishment, the indiscriminate use of force, and basically the two-state solution. Well, the question of who has the greatest claim to the Holy Land remains unresolved. And as we know from current events, it's still a matter of considerable contention. Intense debate, disagreement, and war, with historical, religious, and political arguments underpinning both the Israeli and the Palestinian perspectives. They both feel they have a right to this Holy Land. Given that the conflict between Israel and Palestine is one of the longest running and most violent disputes in the world, we're not going to resolve this during the next hour or so of this meeting. Rather, I propose that we travel together vicariously on a journey to the Holy Land with glimpses of the Holy Land during a period of relative calm. I was going to say, hear the calls of prayer, the Jewish shofar, the Christian bells, and the Muslim adhan. And they oftentimes were bringing in the sounds of prayer all at the same time even. But these sounds, and the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Quran, and the temple shown on the screen, represent all three religions and all call for a peaceful existence of humankind. But sadly, peace is most elusive in the Holy Land. Betty and I have traveled a good bit over the years and have enjoyed every country and every state and island that we visited. More than 60 countries, 49 of the 50 states. We miss North Dakota. I've never been there. But travel to the Holy Land is something really special, something ethereal, spiritually awakening, and historically awing. How can one take in stride the experiences such as renewing our baptismal vows in the River Jordan, renewing our marriage vows at Cana, renewing our physical bodies at the Dead Sea, refreshing our faith following the footsteps of Christ, and visiting the sites of many religious faiths? The trip was all that and more. I want to point out some of these areas that we'll be talking about. And you have them on your maps too on each of the tables. We have the basic areas of the Sea of Galilee, River Jordan, the Dead Sea, up here around the Sea of Galilee. So far, spelled and pronounced 8 different ways. I found through Google, 8 different ways. So here's Capernaum, there's Nazareth, that's on your map. We have then Tel Aviv, that we were talking about. We have Jerusalem, Masada down here, Bethlehem, Jericho, Qumran. We'll be looking at all those. Israel is a small yet diverse Middle Eastern country on the Mediterranean Sea. It's regarded, as we've been saying, by Jews, Christians, and Muslims as the biblical Holy Land. Its most sacred sites are in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is known as the Holy City, City of Prophets, City of Peace, although it's not very often that. Within the old city of Jerusalem, the dominating Temple Mount complex Temple Mount complex that includes the Dome of the Rock Shrine, the historic mosque, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The Holy Land is unique and beautiful in many ways, rich with a variety of historical, archaeological, and religious sites. You can't help but be charmed by the sweeping vistas, the hospitable citizens, and the inspirational images. It's an enchanting mixture of the ancient and the modern. Yet, the history and politics of this small bit of land along the Mediterranean is complex and bewildering and even tragic. Politically, Israel contains two areas, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, that are basically under Israel's military occupation. Now, who knows exactly what's happening within the last year or two? These occupied Palestinian territories have been under the Israeli military occupation, with checkpoints all around where you can go and where you can't go. Many, though all Palestinian Arabs who live in Israel, consider themselves Muslims. And an increasing number of Jews have built settlements on the West Bank and in Gaza, complicating matters further. Our major guide, other than Monsignor Palando that I'll talk about in a minute, our major guide on our journey to the Holy Land said he was a Palestinian Arab, a Christian Catholic, who had passports from Jordan and Israel. Arriving in Tel Aviv, at Ben Gurion Airport, we traveled by bus to Jerusalem, capturing our first view of the city and hearing these first calls of prayer that I mentioned and whose sounds we didn't get. Our focus was a Christian Catholic emphasis, and as we traveled with a basically Catholic group. There were some exceptions, and Monsignor Peter Palando of St. Columba Cathedral. So this was planned actually by the diocese, and Peter Palando, Monsignor Palando was our guide. In Jerusalem, there's Tel Aviv. Despite the huge crowds in Jerusalem, we found the people and the visitors and natives alike hospitable and very helpful. But of course, the most significant and poignant aspect of our journey to the Holy Land was following some of the important footsteps of Jesus. A problem we had with in Jerusalem was in close quarters. It got pretty crowded, needless to say, and not necessarily pushing and shoving, but in some cases there were a lot of candles, and with some women in particular had flouncy kinds of clothes on. We were afraid that might catch fire with all of these crowds. Fortunately, it did not. On our first day in Jerusalem, we entered the Mount of Olives. Where we viewed the place of the Ascension. The Mount of Olives is named for the olive groves that once covered the eastern slopes of Jerusalem's old city. It's been used as a Jewish cemetery for over 3,000 years, holds approximately 150,000 graves, making it central to the tradition of the Jewish cemeteries. Several key events in the life of Jesus, as related in the Gospel, took place at the Mount of Olives. And in the Acts of the Apostles, it's described as the place from which Jesus ascended into heaven 40 days after his resurrection. Because of its association with both Jesus and Mary, the Mount has been the site of Christian worship since ancient times and is today a major site of pilgrimage for Catholics, the Eastern Orthodox, and Protestants. It has also been the site of a 4th century Christian church and monastery, then later became an Islamic mosque, and this happened often, changing from the sites and changing the buildings from one religious group to another. The restored church is now known as the Pater Noster. And is built right next to the site of that old 4th century basilica that was changed again then by the Muslims, and then back now to Jewish. The memory of Jesus' teaching remained associated with this site, and during the Crusades, it became exclusively associated with the teaching of the Lord's Prayer. The site features separate slabs, as you say, which contains the Lord's Prayer in a multitude of languages. The site also houses the slab of stone believed to contain one of Jesus' footprints. Now, a number of things that maybe I've been saying and all the literature says, is that tradition says. Now, who knows precisely in some of these things. We then walk down to the Church of the Dominus Flevit, where Jesus wept over the city of Jerusalem and foretold its destruction. At the foot of the Mount of Olives, we visited the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus prayed and his disciples slept the night before his betrayal and his crucifixion. According to the New Testament, it was a place that Jesus and his disciples often visited, which allowed Judas to find him on the night of his arrest. There are 4 locations that claim to be the place where Jesus prayed on the night of his betrayal. Those are the various areas supposedly where the praying took place. It seems that it was the Church of All Nations, which was a church put up in modern times, and it was funded by the citizens of the world, frankly. So the Church of All Nations is built over the rock of agony on which Jesus is believed to have prayed in agony on the night before he was crucified. These are all the Church of Nations. We then visited the upper room, or the cenacle, the site of the Last Supper. This Last Supper room is a 2nd-story room that tradition tells us commemorates where Jesus shared the Last Supper with the disciples. It's located directly above the tomb of David and near the Dormition Abbey. We continue then to the Dormition Abbey, built over the site where the Virgin Mary was laid to rest. I was challenged on this once when I gave a talk and said, well, she was not buried there. She just went right up to heaven. Well, this is the secular, this is the human remains where she was laid to rest. Dormition Abbey, the name means eternal sleep. We moved on to the Church of St. Peter in Gallicantu, which means cock's crow, built over the site of the house of the high priest Caiaphas. and the dungeon where Jesus was imprisoned before his trial. It's also here that Peter denied knowing Christ thrice, 3 times. On the day we headed to Bethlehem, we started with the Basilica of the Nativity that I'll get to in just a second. When we had to travel a little bit through the desert, through part desert anyway, and when we got to the area where we got off the bus, they had a number of people selling their goods, had a number of camels present. I'm saying that for a particular purpose and get back to it. So we went to in Bethlehem, to the Basilica of the Nativity. Very elaborate. Beautiful. And the grotto, venerated as the birthplace of Jesus. The Basilica of the Nativity was built over the grotto in which Jesus was born. On the eastern side of the grotto is a circular recess containing a large silver star, which designates the spot where, as tradition has it, Jesus was born. The star has 14 points and is inscribed with a Latin inscription which translates, "Here Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary." There's also a cave chapel there. We'll be talking about that in a minute too. When we came out, all the camels and the salespeople were all gone. And this was our only little bit of problem. A tear gas canister was thrown, and we were told by our bus driver, "Run for the bus." Now, we weren't sure if that was for our benefit or if it was just a coincidence. In any event, we ran for the bus, and it was toxic. I've never, other than that, been affected by or been in the presence of anything like a tear gas. But everything turned out all right. From there we went to the Church of St. Catherine, in honor of St. Catherine, who died as a martyr in Egypt during the 4th century. This is located outside the structure is the Crusaders' cloister and cave of St. Jerome, who is best known for his translating the Bible into Latin over a period of 30 years. Here too we saw the Chapel of the Innocents. It's Chapel of the Holy Innocents, which is said to be the burial place of infants killed by King Herod in his attempt to eliminate the newborn King of the Jews. Now we all know that there was such a proclamation. Herod heard about the so-called King of the Jews, wanted to eliminate all newborns. It's at that point that Jesus and Mary and Joseph went to Egypt. And they waited for about a year and a half, till Herod died, until they came back then to Bethlehem. Continuing, visited the shepherds' fields, where the Gospel of St. Luke tells us that an angel announced the birth of Jesus. We're told that the angel's good news was not given to noble people or people who were so pious, but to the workers or to the shepherds with a low reputation. The angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, For see, I am bringing you good news of great joy for all the people. To you is born this day, in the city of David, a Savior, who is the Messiah, the Lord. We ended a particular day at Ein Karim, the village home of St. Elizabeth, the mother of John the Baptist, where we toured the Church of St. John the Baptist, honoring St. John, and the Church of the Visitation that honors the visit paid by the Virgin Mary to Elizabeth. We're told that Elizabeth was already pregnant when Mary visited her to tell her of the impending birth of Jesus. Tradition tells us that Gabriel appeared to the elderly Zechariah, Elizabeth's husband, and told him that his wife Elizabeth was to bear a son. Zechariah was skeptical. He was dumbstruck because he said apparently then God cured her of her barrenness. Baby John was born. Okay, Zechariah said, well, I guess that's what happens. As proof, he revealed that Mary's elderly cousin Elizabeth was already 6 months pregnant. The Virgin Mary was told of her impending birth. Mary hastened to the summer house at Ein Karim, where Elizabeth remained in seclusion for the last 5 months of her pregnancy. This is the site, then, too, where tradition tells us that Mary recited her song of praise, the Magnificat, one of the most ancient of Marian hymns. We journeyed then to Jericho, one of the oldest cities in the world, if not the oldest city in the world, continuously inhabited over 10,000 years. Over the many millennia, Jericho has become a haven for Israelites, Christians, Jews, and Muslims. We viewed the old city and the Mount of Temptation. The latter is said to be the hill in the Judean desert where Jesus, after his baptism by John in the Jordan River, was tempted by the devil. According to the New Testament, as recorded in the Gospels of Matthew, chapter 4, verses 1 to 11, and Luke, chapter 4, verses 1 to 13, and fleetingly in Mark, chapter 1, verses 12 to 13, that the Holy Spirit was led into the desert. While he fasted, the devil tempted him 3 times to prove his divinity by demonstrating his supernatural powers. When the 40 days were over, the devil came to him, enticing him to turn rocks into bread. As we know, Jesus refused all of that. That's the Mount of Temptation. Now, under the jurisdiction of the Palestinian National Authority, the monastery on the Mount is owned and managed by the Greek Orthodox Church of Jerusalem. On his final journey to Jerusalem, Jesus passed through Jericho, where he encountered Zacchaeus, chief tax collector of the region. Tax collectors were not popular people, just like the IRS is not today. They were despised as corrupt, and they were traitors to working for the Roman Empire and not for the Jewish community. So Zacchaeus climbed the tree to get a better look as the Lord was passing through. Jesus saw him and said, "Zacchaeus, come down from the tree and take me to your home. Take us to your home." Well, he did. He came down from the tree, and they did go to Zacchaeus' home. As a result of this meeting, Zacchaeus dedicated half of his wealth to the poor and promised to make restitution to all that he had defrauded. This is sort of an example of Jesus' personal earthly mission to bring salvation to the lost. In Eastern Orthodox and Greek Catholic churches of Slavic tradition, the gospel account of Zacchaeus is read on the last Sunday preceding preceding the liturgical preparation for the Great Length, for which reason that Sunday is known as Zacchaeus Sunday. We proceeded to Qumran, an archaeological site of the West Bank located in the dry plateau of the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea, near the Israeli settlement and kibbutz of Kalia. And kibbutz in that area was supposed to be illegal, but the Jewish said we're going to stay there anyway. They denied it. The Dead Sea Scrolls of the ancient Essenes was found in caves beginning in the late 1940s and the 1950s. Some of us remember that pretty clearly. Some of you are way too young. The Dead Sea Scrolls includes manuscripts, a few of which are well preserved, almost intact, but most are written fragments and remnants of a larger manuscript damaged by natural causes or human interference. The writing is on papyrus, parchment, and bronze, and represent writing in Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, and Nabatean Aramaic, created from several hundred years before and after Jesus. They are old. The texts are of great historical, religious, and linguistic significance, since they include the second oldest surviving manuscripts of works later included in the Hebrew Bible, and shows a diversity of religious thought among the Jewish. From there we took a cable car to the top of Masada, the scene of the epic stand between the Jewish rebels and the end of the Great Revolt against Rome nearly 2,000 years ago. That's a model of it. What happened here, about 1,000 Jews held off an enormous Roman force for about 3 years after the destruction of Jerusalem. Finally, the Roman governor, Flavius Silva, marched against Masada with an entire Roman 10th Legion, 10 to 15,000 strong. As it became clear that the Roman army would prevail, remember, this took place over 3 years, the remaining Jews committed suicide. Flavius Joseph, a Jew born and raised in Jerusalem, provided a detailed account of what happened at Masada. His writings were based upon interviews of Roman field commanders. Because Judaism prohibits suicide, Josephus reported that the Jewish defenders had drawn lots and killed each other in turn, down to the last man, who was the only one to actually commit suicide. The siege of Masada is often referred in modern Israel as a symbol of Jewish heroism. Others see it as a case of Jewish radicals refusing to compromise, resorting instead to suicide and the murder of their own families, both prohibited by Judaism. We ended one day enjoying time floating and relaxing in the Dead Sea. What a joy this was. Floating was so easy. Returning upright was tough. I mean, I literally had difficulty. I don't float very well. Betty does. But I don't float very well. But I got right up. But trying to get right back up, it was difficult. The Dead Sea, bordering on Israel and the West Bank, is a lake whose banks are more than 1,400 feet below sea level. 1,400 feet below sea level, among the lowest possible on dry land. Its famously hypersaline water makes a mineral-rich black mud. See that guy out there? That's me. Losing 10 years of my life. When I came out, you use this rich black mud, and it's used for therapeutic and cosmetic purposes. So I came out, I say, about 10 years younger than I am when I went in. There's the guy. See, that's 10 pounds less. 10 years less, something like that. So there are many oases and resorts around in the surrounding desert in the Dead Sea area. On one day, we drove to St. Stephen's Gate, also known as the Lion's Gate or the Sheep Gate. We again entered the city of Jerusalem. So I say this is not all chronological. I went according to our pilgrimage and the way our trip was done. We entered the old city of Jerusalem that is one of 7 gates in Jerusalem's old city walls. Located in the east wall, the entrance marks the beginning of the traditional Christian observance of the last walk of Jesus from prison to crucifixion via Dolorosa. Our tour of the old city began with the Crusader Church of St. Anne and the Pool of Bethesda. The Church of St. Anne is the best preserved Crusader church in Jerusalem. It marks the traditional site of the home of Jesus' maternal grandparents, Anne and Joachim, and the birthplace of the Virgin Mary. The Pool of Bethesda is the site of Jesus' well-known miracle where Jesus healed the paralytic man as recounted in the Gospel of John, chapter 5, verses 2 to 9. Proceeding, we visited the Tower of Antonia, or at least the site of the Tower of Antonia, and it's the site of the Praetorium, and where Apostle Paul spoke where Paul talked about his terrible early life until he met Jesus and was changed, and he spoke at the Tower of Antonia. This was, again, the place that some believe Jesus was taken to stand before Pilate and tried, and then to the Church of Flagellation. Church of Flagellation, a Roman Catholic church and Christian pilgrimage site located in the Muslim quarter. It's here, according to tradition, that Roman soldiers flogged Jesus after he was convicted and sentenced to death. John 19, verses 1 to 3. And it reads, "And the soldiers platted a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they put him on a purple robe and said, 'Hail, King of the Jews!' And they smote him with their hands." This was in preparation of our following the Stations of the Cross at Villa Dolorosa. We went to the first station, Jesus condemned to death. Went to the fifth station, Simon helps Jesus carry his cross. Ninth station, Jesus falls for a third time. And it ends, 14th station, Basilica of the Holy Sepulchre. Well, these are sites that are totally changed from what they were 2,000 years ago. You're still walking on the stones that Jesus walked. And that's moving. That is her moving. There's so many things that were moving. We ended this day. I'm going to walk through the Villa Rosa, and went to the Western Wall, sometimes called the Wailing Wall, in the old city of Jerusalem, a place of prayer and pilgrimage sacred to the Jewish people. It's the only remains of the Second Temple of Jerusalem, held to be uniquely holy by the ancient Jews and destroyed by the Romans in about 70 AD. I don't know, how many of you have been to the Wailing Wall? That's a moving thing too, isn't it? It's very moving. And we saw Obama, no, not really, but there was a picture that we saw in the museum where some of the Dead Sea Scrolls are displayed. On the day we traveled to the Jordan River and to the tourist place of baptism, we had an opportunity to renew our baptismal vows. The Jordan River that I pointed out on the map, and you can see on your map, was about 153 miles long, flowing through north to south, through the Sea of Galilee and onto the Dead Sea. It runs through the land and history of the Bible, giving its waters a spiritual significance that sets it aside from other rivers. This is the site where the Israelites crossed into the Promised Land and where Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. On one day, we took a cruise of the Sea of Galilee from Tiberias to Capharnaum. Here we viewed the boat of Jesus' museum, the boat that could have been one during Jesus' time. Where are we going? Okay. And it's interesting, as we got aboard the ship, and there was supposed to be sound here, it played the Star Spangled Banner. They had the American flag, played the Star Spangled Banner, and you could hear George's voice. You didn't hire me to sing. You wouldn't want to hear that. So we had a nice cruise then across the Sea of Galilee. Capharnaum is sometimes known as the town of Jesus because he carried out the major part of his ministry there. Jesus told Peter and Andrew, "Follow me and I will make you fishers of men." Jesus also made the promise of the Eucharist here. About a year before the Last Supper, Jesus promised to give us the Holy Eucharist. This promise is related in the 6th chapter of the Gospel according to St. John. The fulfillment of this promise took place at the Last Supper. That's the ship that was found. It could have been not necessarily Jesus' ship, but a ship during his time. We visited the excavation of St. Peter's house and St. Peter's church before we continued to visit the church of the primacy of St. Peter. St. Peter's Church is a modern Catholic pilgrimage church found in the archaeological site of the Franciscan monastery at Capharnaum. We walked to nearby Tabgha, had a mass. We had a mass every day with Monsignor. And indeed, when we were traveling on bus, several times we did the rosary too on the bus in our travel. So we walked to nearby Tabgha, where the site where Christ fed the 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish. We proceeded to the Mount of Beatitudes, which commemorate the Sermon on the Mount. So again, our visit to the Mount of Beatitudes commemorates the Sermon on the Mount. As we know, the Sermon on the Mount is a collection of sayings and teachings credited to Jesus, which emphasizes his moral teaching found in the Gospel of Matthew. Before the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus had preached all about Galilee, with great crowds following. The setting for the Sermon on the Mount is related in Matthew and reads, "Upon Jesus seeing his multitudes, he goes up to the mountain and is followed by his disciples and begins to preach." Well, this is the longest continuous section of Jesus speaking found in the New Testament. It has been one of the most widely quoted elements of the gospel. It includes some of the best sayings of Jesus, best known teachings of Jesus, such as the Beatitudes and the Lord's Prayer. The Sermon on the Mount is generally considered to contain the central tenets of the Christian beliefs. On the day we drove to Cana of Galilee, we visited the Franciscan Church of the Wedding Feast. Cana in Galilee, of course, is celebrated as the scene of Jesus' first miracle in changing the water to wine. This miracle is significant for Christian theology. Christians' attendance at the wedding feast and his divine intervention to rescue the host from embarrassment is taken as setting his seat on the sanctity of marriage. Some have said this incident also is seen as an argument against teetotalism. Monsignor Palando offered Mass for us each day. Our visit to Cana was no exception. Indeed, it was among the most memorable, in that Monsignor Palando invited the 3 married couples who were with his group to renew our marriage vows. We continued to Nazareth. Where the angel Gabriel announced to Mary that she was to bear the Son of God. It's also here that Jesus grew up. We visited the Basilica of the Annunciation, which commemorates Angel Gabriel's announcement to Mary. Monsignor Palando had his mother along, who was 90. Betty said to him, "Monsignor, you are a wonderful priest. You're an even better son." Taking care of her mother. So we visited the Basilica of the Annunciation, which again commemorates Angel Gabriel's announcement to Mary. Moving on, we moved to the Chapel of St. Joseph. And it's part of the Annunciation. Chapel of St. Joseph, which purportedly was built over Joseph's carpenter shop, and to the old synagogue, which tradition holds that this simple building stands on the site where Jesus did his early preaching. Today, the synagogue is under the authority of the Greek Catholic Church. Church of St. Gabriel and Mary's Well, which is built over the only freshwater spring in Nazareth, which according to Eastern Orthodox belief is where the Virgin Mary was drawing water at the time of the Annunciation. Afterward, we drove to Mount Tabor, where we witnessed the magnificent view across the plain of Jezreel. It was at Mount Tabor where Jesus was transfigured. The Church of the Transfiguration. No. Well, on our final day, we'll just go through this now. Time is about up. On our final day, we went to the city of Haifa. Haifa is a northern Israeli city built over in the tiers of the Mediterranean Sea, up the northern slope of Mount Carmel. It's the third largest city in Israel, and it is housed Baha'i shrine of the Baha'i religion. Gorgeous. It is absolutely gorgeous. To see the shrine, to be up on the hill, to see all the beautiful gardens and the shrine. And that's built by the Baha'i religious group. Also in that same area around Haifa is the St. Maris Monastery, refers to an early title accorded to Mary, the mother of Jesus. Church of the Carmelite Order. And went to the cave of Elijah the prophet. Here he sometimes lived and sometimes had to hide. Elijah is venerated by Jews, Christians, and Muslims, and Druze also, all of whom come here as pilgrims. Just a couple of, again, Mass every day. One last thing. A joint creation by Arab and Jewish students. They can do something together. Well, this marks the end of my story, our pilgrimage, my glimpses of the Holy Land. However, it's not the end of the story of the Holy Land in Israel. Israel, in 2028, Israel will observe its 80th anniversary as a nation. But its history, we know, goes back 3,000 years. Its past and present experience, tragic difficulties, but the hopes and prayers continue to call for peace. Songs and poems have been written about honoring this land. Many have praised it and remain hopeful. Faithful believers around the world pray for peace. What kind of a peace will it be? How can tragedy be avoided and conflicts resolved? Listen to two of our world's greatest writers. Tragedy can be resolved in one of two ways. There's the Shakespearean resolution, and there's the Chekhovian one. At the end of the Shakespearean tragedy, the stage is strewn with dead bodies, and maybe there's some justice hovering high above. A Chekhov tragedy, on the other hand, ends with everybody disillusioned, embittered, heartbroken, disappointed, absolutely shattered, but still alive. I want a Chekhovian resolution, not a Shakespearean one, in my opinion, for the Israeli-Palestinian conflicts. Let us hope and pray that all people of the Holy Land can accept a peace that nobody wins and nobody loses, yet all peoples can practice their faith and still be alive. Thank you. The end of my comment.
Dr. Beelen, that was incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your pilgrimage with us. Everyone, thank you all so much for coming. Will you be around for a couple of minutes? So if anyone has any questions, Dr. Beelen will be up here for questions or to just congratulate him on a wonderful, indeed, you took out our 20th anniversary season with a bang. Thank you so much. Everybody in September for our 21st season. Have a wonderful summer. We'll see you in September. Thank you all so much for coming.